Hola, hola, amiga. On today's episode, we dive deep into the heart of sustainability, tradition, and cultural identity. On this episode, we welcome hermanas Aidee and Mónica San Miguel from VOLVERDE, who share their inspirational story of starting a business that's not just about products, but about bringing to life the sustainable traditions of our abuelitas and making them relevant in today's world. VOLVERDE is an online marketplace of carefully curated, beautiful, effective, low waste products for your body and home, sourced from a variety of responsible, diverse brands. VOLVERDE makes it easier to discover sustainable product swaps, shop responsibly, and minimize plastic waste. As a female founded company, VOLVERDE also works to amplify other women led sustainable businesses where all of their products are sourced from women, Asian, Black, Brown, or Indigenous owned businesses. Whether you're looking to understand the depth of sustainable living or seeking ways to incorporate ancestral wisdom into modern life, this episode promises to enlighten, inspire, and connect you to the roots that sustain us all. So stay tuned as we embark on this awesome conversation that I had con las dos hermanas, and let's rediscover together how our past can shape a more sustainable future, especially for our future generations. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of two on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in two identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Aide y Mónica, ¿cómo están?
Hola.
Hola.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you both being here on the show and for your willingness to share not just like your business, but also the responsibility as individuals when it comes to sustainability and living an eco-friendly household lifestyle. Right now, at the time of this recording, it is April. So, I'm thinking a lot about Earth Day, right? And how we should be aware about our planet. But in general, as Latinas, we also consume a lot. We tend to buy a lot, and we're sometimes not really cognizant of like how wasteful we could be. And we're almost like assimilating to that culture, right? Of like you buy more and you have more. And so I want us to have a conversation about how we can kind of reclaim the way that our abuelitas lived back in the day in los ranchos, our parents, even, for some of us that are first gen here, and so, yeah, and kind of cultivating those traditions, and that way we can live a sustainable life, but not just for us, but also for our children. So before we delve into that conversation, I would love to have you both introduce yourself, tell our listeners some more a little bit about yourselves.
So I'm Aidee. I studied engineering at the University of Illinois, and I am the fourth out of five sisters. Me and Monica are hermanas. I also have a 1-year-old, first-time mom. Very scary. I was like nervous about doing that. And something that I really love to do in my spare time when I have spare time, and very important to make that spare time, is I love like going to concerts. Like that's something that I've always done and I want to continue doing now that I have my daughter.
Oh, that's awesome. What kind of concerts do you like to go to?
The last concert I went to was a Dominic Fike, if anyone knows him, love him. And then the next concert I'm going to is going to be Helado Negro. Love that dude also. If you like very chill, mellow music, like I just like listening to him when I'm about to go to sleep. Love it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
It is clearly the cool Tia amongst the. She's got an amazing record collection as well. My kids love to go hang out and listen to her records. And I'm Monica. I am the eldest of the five, so it also means I'm like the third parent. I was born in Mexico, and I was grew up here in Chicago, or in the south suburbs of Chicago. And one thing that's interesting is like even though Aidee and I are sisters, and we obviously have a lot of shared experiences, but me being the eldest and her being one of the younger ones, it's been a really interesting kind of difference in terms of just our experiences. And so, um, you know, we experience being Latinas differently, and a lot of that being driven by us, by me not, coming here without just being an immigrant and knowing like at a very young age that I was not born here and the limitations with that. And so I like to share that because I think that also, that diversity and those different experiences have also made us really great partners and great business partners, because we see things differently, and that really helps with our business.
Yes.
I studied economics. I got my policy degree, my master's. I thought I was going to work in government or a nonprofit. I ended up working in consumer financial services for 10 years. And then just really got burnt out by the corporate, um, fintech grind, and really felt like I reconnect with something that I truly felt passionate about. If I'm going to work 10 hours a day, I want it to mean something. And then thankfully this idea came about, and we just both jumped on it. I'm also a mama of two. I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And in my pastime, I love to spend time in nature. I'm like a señora that is also, I never thought I would enjoy nature like I do now. And I also love live music. Like I love salsa, I love banda. Like I'm a street music person. If there's
Okay.
percussion and like rhythm, that's me. Gives me goosebumps. But yes, give me the live corridos. I was actually just in Mazatlan, and like my heart exploded listening to the banda on the streets, on the beach. Like that was just where I belong.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I love it that you're both sisters. You're both partners, in this business venture that we'll definitely talk a little bit more about. And yeah, like you both kind of remind me of my mom and her sisters, because she's also a sister of five. So son cinco hermanas. And all of my
Aw.
aunties are just amazing. Like all of them are imperfect, just like everyone is, but I love it, right? Each and every one has their own story. Each and every one is very unique. And so what you shared,
Mhm.
Monica, it's like, yeah, even though you're both sisters, it's almost like you were brought up differently, but in reality, it just obviously it's almost like, perhaps there are life lessons learned that your parents have done, or the circumstances that they had to endure, and then
Yeah.
you become different individuals and you're accustomed to a different culture or lifestyle, whatever it is. So thank you both for sharing your stories and your upbringing as well. And we'll definitely talk about what really influenced you both to open up Volverde, which I'm really excited. But let's take a couple of steps back. And I know that the topic of this episode is kind of like passing down your Abuelita Susty traditions into the next generation. And so, in your kind of experience growing up, or what you are living now in your current lifestyle or current seasons of life, like what are some of the long held sustainable traditions that inspired you? Um, as it relates to living a sustainable life, and what are kind of like their significance, seeing your family utilizing that?
Yeah, there's so many. And this is basically like we love this question because this really gets at the heart of the narrative that we're really trying to shape and share in the sustainability space. And I think part of the context is that, both Aidee and I we're really into sustainability and, before having kids even. And when we found ourselves shopping or looking for sustainable products, we just didn't see, when you think sustainability or what someone that lives eco-friendly looks like, the fact that it's not your abuelita or your mama that first comes to mind is a result of, a lot of marketing and a lot of, um, you know, I think intentional co-option of what sustainability looks like because, companies are trying to sell us an image, trying to sell us a vibe, to justify paying crazy prices for things that we grew up with. And so it took a while before I think we really made that connection that like, hey, like we grew up doing so much of this. And, for example, our mom would use our gym t-shirts because we would have to buy them. And then when you're done with them, you don't turn them back to the school. Like they're yours. So I still remember that our gym t-shirts were red and she would use them to dry the floors or as rags around the house. And I remember, at some point feeling a little bit embarrassed when my school friends would come over and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, is that our gym shirt?" Um, and or like our grandma, she repurposed. She was the queen of like leftovers. If she would make caldito de pollo one night and there was like leftovers the next day, she would, take out all the chicken and then make flautas. And like there was just this concept of waste was very different. And it was just the way they lived. Everything had a purpose, everything had a function, and you don't toss things out until it's truly no longer functional. Not because you don't like it, not because, and that sense of really just respecting the integrity of everything that you bring into your home. Um, those are just a couple of examples that really stick to me because they were never like, "Oh, I'm doing this because I'm sustainable and I learned this from a blogger." It was just it was almost out of respect and out of tradition and custom that you know, they were just so thoughtful with everything they would bring into the house and then, making sure we were repurposing everything to minimize waste and to just make things go longer.
Yeah, and I think even like on another aspect, because our abuelita and like our abuelito, like they grew up in a small pueblito, like we, like a lot of us grew up with remedios. And I remember
Mm.
being so embarrassed of like always having to try these crazy remedios. And even growing up, we would laugh at all the remedios that my mom would do. Cause I remember she used to do one with a purple onion and I thought it was gross.
Yeah.
But now guess who's calling our mom asking her for these remedios? Like we are like, and I think it's so important to kind of keep that tradition of using these natural remedies that you didn't even realize like were so important or valued when you're younger because you don't see the importance, and it's not until you get a little bit older and you're just like, man, you crave that connection to your roots of to where you come from, and like the fact that these remedios were used by our abuelita and so that definitely is super important to us and something that we've carried on and will carry on with our own kids.
Yes.
And I think that like that, like, for us in our community, when we talk about sustainability, I think it's important, like for us, it's a connection. It's
Mm.
connecting back to Mother Earth. It's connecting back to our traditions. It's connecting to the remedios. It's not about reducing plastic. That's a great outcome, but that's not our motivator. Our motivator is connection. And I think people don't get that. People outside of our community don't get that, and that's why no one's talking to us. No one in the sustainability world is thinking thoughtfully about Latinos, Latinas as consumers and saying, yes, plastic reduction matters, but that's like almost like that's like an outcome of first reconnecting and then and so I think it's just a totally different conversation for us. Whereas when you
Yeah.
go into places, it's like, how do we like zero waste everything? And that's just not
How
the
do you get
starting.
all your plastic used in a little container? And
Yes. That is so interesting. And I haven't thought of it that way, to be honest. And it makes sense, right? It's like it's purposeful. It's not just
Yes.
action oriented sort of
Mhm.
thing. There's more meaning behind it. And the fact that you mentioned about that connection piece, it makes so much sense.
If we were to take two average Volverde customers and one, we tell them, do this because it reduces your plastic, footprint. And then the other, do this because it reminds you of your abuelita and your mama. And this is how we've done it for, generations. That last one, their face lights up. They're like,
Mm.
yes, I remember this. Like, they get it and they connect. So we've like tested this has kind of come from a lot of events and just kind of getting to know our customers. We feel it, but then we see it in people's faces, and it's such a like great feeling to be like, yes, we're doing something that matters and people understand.
Yes. Oh, I love it. You literally gave me chills. Just yeah, like it's almost like bringing back that either childhood memory, right? Like seeing depictions or parts of like your abuelita cleaning or your mom, cleaning or, the way
Yeah,
that they would prepare food and things like that. Like oftentimes that can be overlooked for many folks, right?
yeah,
That claim that they're living sustainable
right,
and it's mundane, but there's definitely more meaning behind it and significance. Yeah.
right.
So interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
as far as with like, the remedios part, like is there a way that at least for you both, and I wanted to ask this when Aidee was talking about this, like are you both like curating, you know, these recetas, these remedios, because now you're asking your mom, but to make sure that, your daughters or your children, right? Like to make sure that this is passed along. Like, how are you keeping these remedios to continue it on to your kids?
so with actual remedios, I haven't done this, but it's something that I've been wanting to do this. I actually do this with my cooking recipes. So I have a little like notebook where I got it gifted from one of my other sisters, and I will actually write down all of my dad's like cooking recipes. And I like have to keep adding notes because like every true parent, they keep leaving out little advice and tidbits. So I've definitely done this with like cooking recetas, but this is something I also want to do with like remedios that we have. Just like some of them are at the top of my head. Like my daughter was sick a week ago, and so I made her some tecito, and I put the honey and the limon, and like some like you just come naturally. And I think as they grow up, they'll see that we're doing these things. And I think just having like more conversations with them, and like versus just like here, toma esto, like
Right. Yeah, like
you
there's
know,
meaning behind it, right?
right.
It's having that connection piece for
Right.
sure. Yeah, it's like super full circle here. Yeah. And so, speaking of like the sustainability piece, right? Like, do you think that Latinos are unconsciously environmentalists, even though you both probably talked about it, right? Like, and this is your motive to creating a business, but like, when was your aha moment that you realized, wait, this is what our grandparents did? This is what my parents did, right? And do you think that sustainable life has always been practiced in our community, but unintentionally?
Yeah.
Yeah, you recognize it in the humor, right? I'm sure you've seen those memes. There's so many of them, and they're great, and they're because they're like a reminder again of our thesis here, which you those memes of like you see the butter container and you think you're opening butter, but it's actually salsa, or the cookie tin and you think you're gonna have a cookie, but it's needles and thread. And so a lot of that, those memes like say something about our culture. They say they're sharing a very universal experience. And so, and every Latino household has like a bag of plastic bags that they save to reuse. And I think that those are it's kind of an evidence that we all recognize these things. Like, why are we like this? But also, it's so cool that we're like this.
Mm,
Um, and I think so. I do think that is something that's um, you know, generally practiced in our. Now, I'm not going to speak for every Latino, but I do think that, like, generally speaking, these moments resonate with us. I think they resonate out of resilience and, again, like, that connection to the earth, because many of our ancestors their lives literally depended on the earth, right? And that I think created very natural connection to say, like, for our grandparents, if it didn't rain, they weren't able to harvest, and, like, that meant their animals couldn't get fed, and that meant, their kids couldn't go to school. Like, there was a very direct relationship between nature and their life and their outcomes, and
mhm,
so I think that created this kind of very subconscious connection where there was just more awareness, and we don't have the language to necessarily talk about it that way. We don't call it sustainability or eco-friendly or zero waste, but it's very much a part of our fabric.
mhm.
Um, so much of Latin America is agricultural, and there's that we produce. There's such a diversity of production, so I think it is a very universal thing.
Mm,
Yeah, and I also would like to add, like, I think it's also important to talk about how a lot of us are first gen Latinos here in the US. And a lot of times we were practicing sustainability without knowing it because of financial necessity. Like, we're a
Mhm.
family of seven, like, five girls, and, we all wanted to be in the latest cool trends at school. But, our parents had us shopping at La Segunda at a thrift store, or I still remember all of us would share clothes all the time, and we thought this was perfectly normal. I didn't know that some people think it's weird to share clothes, but we, like, grew up that close. Like, we would just share clothes, and even with cousins, we get our clothes passed down, and that's something that I do. I like my sister has a daughter who is 2 years old, and my daughter is 1, and we're starting to practice that same thing because it's like, why am I gonna let that clothes go to waste? Like, my daughter
Yep.
can use it. It's perfectly fine clothes. Like, you know, it's good.
Yeah, it's almost like, there's intentionality there, right? But without speaking up or
Yes.
verbalizing it, or, like once you do recognize like a certain word, right? And it's usually trendy, that's like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, that's what my family has always been doing. And it's
Right.
very annoying when our ancestors have been utilizing these practices, but obviously the fact of minimalism, sustainability, it's like super trendy, and I'm so glad that you exist, that your platform exists, because that is a way of sort of kind of reclaiming that, right? And making people aware, like, no, we've always been this way.
Right.
It's just that through assimilation, sometimes we've lost those practices. Or, for example, out of survival, you know, our parents had to live a certain lifestyle, and then in a way, though, growing up we make fun of it, or we think that, oh, they're poor or they're cheap, whatever it is. And there's that negative kind of language behind that too, and it's almost an embarrassment, but in reality it's smart and it's helpful and it's sustainable, and so, yeah, there's just, like, a lot of little nuggets there that I'm just like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. And really, how can we, like, reclaim the sustainable traditions that, at least you've shared so far on this episode, and or, like, the traditions that your abuelita has shared or our abuelitas have shared or taught us, and how can we kinda pass that on into the next generation?
Yeah. So, I mean, one, I think that, there are a lot of people who don't have that connection with maybe family. So you can always follow us on Instagram. We're always talking about our cultural connection. But this is something even that's hard for us. So our grandmother passed away in 2016. And so we can no longer ask her these questions. And I wish, we wish we could ask her all these things that she used to do. And so what we have to do now, and that we're really enjoying is like asking our mom, asking our dad, asking our
Good deal.
tias and like kind of yeah, and we're kind of like reconnecting with our family and learning new stories about our grandmother or how things were when they grew up in the pueblo. And it's such an amazing process. So if you have that privilege of being able to ask those questions right now to your family and learning how things were done in the past, like I highly recommend and encourage everyone to start doing that. Because then these stories, like it's now you're practicing that indigenous way of storytelling because now I can take these stories and these traditions and pass them on to my kid and tell her, hey,
Mhm.
when your abuelita or bisabuelita was growing up, they used to use a plant as soap and they used to go wash in the rio and just, rub themselves with the little plantita to wash themselves. And I think that's such a amazing and beautiful process. And I do really wish we could really connect with our abuelita a little bit more, but I love that we're able to hear these stories from our aunts and uncles and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Mm.
I remember, like, when we first heard that story, I was like, "My mom is just making something up." Like, that just sounded so,
Yeah.
how does a planta clean you? Like, because she was like, "It bubbles, it suds." Like, there's this and then I Googled it, and sure enough, it's a plant that, saponifies, like a real it releases these oils, and it does bubble, it does
What
lather.
what kind of plant is this?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm gonna have to we should make some content on this, but, I don't remember what it was called anymore because I was looking it up right when she was telling me. Um,
Yeah.
it's a thing, and, we
Interesting.
recently heard about this story, and I feel like through this business and through, like I just said, really wanting to tell more of that story, we've been like, "Hey, mom, how did you guys shower?" Like, because they didn't have running water. And they would have to go to the Rio and do laundry, and how did you guys do laundry? And, you know, there's no trash collection. What did you guys do? And I do remember my grandmother composting, um, but, like, I didn't even know the word composting in Spanish until recently. So, it's like these things that you just see, like the bones, right? She would throw them, in this
Mm.
pit and would just turn into soil. Um,
Wow.
so, a lot of it just starts with, I think, asking the questions of our ancestors, the ones that we have today, and, similarly to the remedios, right? Just understanding what were our traditions? What did we do? How did our ancestors live? And starting with that, right? I think that's always such a powerful place to start. Um, a lot of times some people, come to us and, they might not know what an escobeta is, or they might not know what an agave fiber, what an ayate is or agave fiber, but, they'll show it to their moms and their mom's like, "Oh, I know what that is." So there's a lot of really nice interest, intergenerational
Mm.
connection that happens through seeing a product in our modern context that, like, our mamas grew up seeing and using.
Yeah.
Um, so that's also another, just sometimes just trying a swap and, like, or talking to your mom or your tias, about, have you ever seen this or have you ever heard of this? And it's brought some really great stories to
Yeah.
our life.
And I find that interesting, right? Because like when I think about my dad and his upbringing, I mean, he was very poor. Like
Mhm.
he puts out a joke saying that, "Oh, I was born without diapers and I never wore a diaper. I just like pooped outside." And I'm like, "Oh, well, kudos to you, you know?" But really when you think about like I recently read that it takes like 200 years for a diaper to decompose. Just
Yep.
one diaper.
And yep.
And I'm just like, wow, like
Mhm.
that needs to change. Like that in itself just needs to change because clearly there's too many kids
Yeah.
in our planet. And just
Yeah.
thinking about that and the landfill and things. And so like when my dad tells me his stories and his upbringing that literally, they depended on uh rainfall, right? So that they can shower themselves. Otherwise, they didn't have no running water, they would go to el salto, and that was the only way that they would, get bathed. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, you live this life, but now you have a boatload of products. Right now, you're using a bunch of suavitel in your clothes. You have fabuloso all over on the floors. You're using so much product, so many smells and scents. Oh my gosh. Every time I go to my parents' house, sorry, mom, you're probably listening to this, but every time I go to their house, it smells like Febreze.
Air
Like,
freshener.
yes,
Yeah.
like all of,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, this is like too much. And I always call it out. I'm like, Ma, this is too much. It's killing me. And
Yeah.
so what do you think happened, right, between living a super sustainable life, connected with nature, and this is just like one generation, and it may be specifically my parents, I don't know about your parents, right, but like they live such a simple life to suddenly, bam, like they're living a
Yeah.
Yep.
completely different life. So like, what, based on your analysis or your guesstimates, why do you
Yeah.
think that has changed?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talk about this a lot between me and Monica, and we touched a little bit about it a little bit. And I think how Monica brought up like that marketing aspect where, our parents were marketed that American dream. And, we were told to assimilate. And a lot of times in that assimilation, it meant forgetting some of those traditions or not doing some of those traditions because here comes single use plastic. And that was a sign of like, oh, I have money, I can afford, that this stuff versus maybe using something a little bit more natural. Because using, those natural things was kind of an indication of your status of being poor. Versus like, oh, now I can go and afford some Tide at the store or Fabuloso, as we said, versus using more natural ingredients. And I think that's where a lot was lost in that generation, in our parents. We talk about this all the time. It is so crazy how much was lost, and it just makes
Yeah.
me so sad all the time that, you know, they know what all these things are, but they've been trained to kind of live that American dream and say, I made it, by
Right.
using all these products.
Mm,
In that sense, we were talking about this today with one of our brand partners. I think there is a very real psychological conditioning that happens around cleaning and what clean
Mhm.
smells like, right? And a
mm,
lot of that that starts in Mexico too, right? In the sense of like, what does clean look like and what does it smell like? And unfortunately, that gets determined by these big conglomerates that have a lot of money and a lot of vested interest in getting us to buy. I mean, think about like Fabuloso, right? Just the chokehold that one product has on our community. Clorox too, right? They have a whole team that focuses on Latinos and the scent profiles that we like because
Mm.
they know Latinos are the demographic that spends the most money on cleaning products. Like it's a real, we're an important demographic, but I think it is very cultural and a lot of that I think is that the way in which these companies have socialized us, even starting there. Um, but I think that that's changing with our generation
mm,
because we have a different set of um, we have different drivers and different motivators, right? For us, it's not as much about the American dream. We probably frown on it, right? For us, it's more like being conscious, being reconnecting. We're like the nostalgic generation. We miss
mm,
what they left behind. Um, and we no somos ni de aquí ni de allá, that feeling of like growing up between two countries and two cultures. And so I think um our generation tends to be more yearning of connection and yearning, and also just I think more aware of environmental impacts, especially as it's affecting our kids. Right? This is not like a problem that's way down in the future. Like it's very real. So I think there's that generational difference as well. Um, but it's just also the way these companies have inserted themselves. But I'm very hopeful because I think we somos más los buenos. There's more of us that care, and um, And I think, our generation is going to change the course of this. I think
Yeah.
I'm manifesting that those old school ways are gonna slowly fade away.
And I
Do,
think people will be surprised that as you like kind of embark on your journey of reconnecting and asking questions, like we sell like an agave body sponge that reminds us a lot of our abuelita. And it's like my mom, like she was just like so triggered by that. She was like, "Oh my God, like this is what we used to use like growing up."
Mhm.
And like that's what she uses now.
Yeah,
And that happens a lot of times, like as Monica said, when we go to pop-ups and we see like this, you see that reconnecting with something that you grow up with, and like you get excited because you're just like, "Oh my God, I can find this." And like this, you're right, this is not toxic. And so I should go back to that that connection, and it's really amazing to see.
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's just so powerful, right? And it almost like allows your mom in this example the ability to just like be who she was, right? It's like oftentimes they were trained or conditioned to assimilate, to code switch, right? Even us, we
yeah.
were taught to just like ignore our past. And
Mhm.
they have the freedom to do that. When we really think about the American dream, I'm very critical of it. Like, trust me, I always come in with my critical hat, like, oh, what really is it? But the one thing
Same.
that I can see it as a benefit is that you can bring your old way of living back here,
Mhm.
and we have that leverage in reclaiming that, right? Like, screw all those trendy people, those
Yeah.
posers, I guess. We're the true like OGs, right? I,
Right.
I just think that, we should speak up about it.
Mhm.
And I'm just loving that through your platform you are able to showcase that, right? And remind people like, no, remember where you came from, and what your ancestors did, and sort of reclaiming it. And Monica, you mentioned something about how, based on our practices and what we're doing now, it can impact our children. And I really think about that a lot, right? I think of like about the diaper situation, and I really wanted to do cloth diapers, and I feel so guilty, you know, but because let's not even dive there, but because of the culture, right? And the lack of opportunities for moms specifically, returning back to work and things like that. Like, there's so many layers to the system in itself, where oftentimes we look at whatever is convenient, but not really thinking
Absolutely.
long term, right? Like, so
Yeah.
in little nuggets or little ways that we can change and do make an impact, like how can our children be a part of this, right? Like, how can we help them like live a sustainable lifestyle and uphold those traditions that we were taught, so that our children can live in a way that perhaps we didn't, like growing up.
I think that it's almost using these, like, just to borrow the capitalistic term, like, it's a competitive advantage for them, really, to learn how to live with a lighter footprint. And so I think of it, and my husband, we talk about this too, just like part of how we're gonna teach and prepare our children to live in the world that we're leaving them behind is to teach them to live more sustainably, because they are going to grow up in a world where there's water scarcity, where there is our landfills, like the cost of picking up trash is just going to go up because there's not enough space, right? And there's like at some point, part of the problem, part of why right now it's, people are choosing not to live sustainably is because there's false subsidies for plastic, right? Plastic is cheap, and it's not properly accounting for the true cost of producing and disposing of that material. But at some point, I think that's going to catch up, and so our kids will be better positioned if they know how to compost, right? So we compost. We're teaching them that, and now like it's for them, it's like this second nature, where when we go to visit abuelitos and there's like leftovers, they kind of are like, "What do we do with this food? We're gonna throw it in the trash," we all, and I think that's a great sign that they're feeling odd at throwing food in the trash, or even like, again, like we um, shop exclusively at thrift stores for them. Like, very rarely do they get new clothes because there's enough clothes in this world already. They don't need new clothes, and like that they know how it is. That is how it is. Um, and bars like shampoo and conditioner bars, like they love it. They use them all the time. All of the products that we have, I feel like they're always trying to test them out. Um, and so just involving them in that journey, as we go through it, go through them ourselves, as part of it's a part of like telling them this is how we used to live, this is how Abuelita used to shower. Um, but also preparing them because I do think they are going to live in a world where it's not going to be a choice anymore. It's going to be just the reality.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I'd like to add, like, think Monica being so nice. So Monica's actually the one who, led, our sustainability charge. She's the one who taught all of us to use cloth diapers. She was actually the first one. And I remember being like, girl, you're doing what? And and now, like, the cloth diapers that she used, like, have been through another sister, and now I'm using them. And so it, you know, I was at one point like, oh man, I'm not gonna do that. That sounds real crazy. And look, here I am, a year into like cloth diapering. And it's funny because her kids see that and they think it's normal. They're just like, "Oh,
Mm.
yeah, okay, she has a cloth diaper," like, all they care about is like, "Oh, she has a stinky poop," or, like, they're not shocked that it's like a cloth diaper. And I think that's, like
Yeah.
she said, very important. And I think something else that also comes to mind, like, I don't know if your parents were like this, but my dad was always very conscious about our use of, like, electricity.
Yes.
And so
Mm,
Till this day.
yeah,
And now my
and, like,
husband is feeding off of that.
yes, and, like, I sometimes am like that, and I have to, like, course correct myself because I think it's important to, like, bring a little humor too. Because like, my dad would be like, we would open the door, and he'd be like, $1, $2, like, letting out all the AC. And, like, I think it's, like, teaching them and actually talking to them about, "Okay, well, why is it important not to be leaving the door open?" Versus, like, my dad would just go around, turn off all the lights, we're sitting in the dark,
really?
like so it's like, I think actually having conversations with your kids, and like, kids are smart, like they understand these things. And maybe
Yeah.
you want to do them like how our dad did, but I think maybe a
Yeah.
combo of both.
Oh,
We tell
funny.
people stories. They think it's so funny that he would do that. He would just like shut off the lights or like, just he was just very and so you got to give them credit. They were conscious in certain things. But they have bleach and fabuloso everywhere, but they were very he still lived we would walk a lot. We, were used a ton. So it's not all black and white, but we do give him credit for being very instilling that in us too, and just being like
Yeah.
really conscious about not wasting electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think about my dad too. And I think I haven't even like allowed myself to ask him. I see it as like kind of funny, humorous, or oh, it's my dad's hobby. But no, I think he's without having this conscious mindset that he is being sustainable. My dad has
No.
a whole system in the backyard. He has like barrels and he collects water from the rainfall. And
It's
through
amazing.
that water, as soon as cisterna, I guess, like,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, a
yeah,
cistern.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so through that water, he waters the plants and he's able to grow all these vegetables
That's
and
what the, like, crunchy people call them, rain barrels.
rain barrels. Okay.
Yes.
And they're expensive, like, it's like $60 to buy them
Yes,
just to
yes.
collect rainwater.
Well, he's funny. He just goes out and about and finds them in dumpsters or in the
Mhm.
alleys. Yeah. So I don't think he's actually like spent money and he created his own
Yeah.
like
Absolutely.
piping system. It's
I
wild.
know.
I should probably send you both a picture.
Yes,
Mhm.
you should. Can he
Yeah.
show us how?
Yeah, but that's how he spends his days, just like making sure that he gets to water his plantitas,
Yeah,
his vegetables, y todo eso,
rainwater.
and and he does it out of like the rainfall without spending a bill, like a penny on the water bill, you know?
Yes,
So,
and that is so, like, a perfect example, like, he wouldn't ever call that sustainable, but,
no.
like, that, your kids seeing that, in a world when, like, we're running out of water, knowing having that know-how and even the thought and the idea of, like, "I'm gonna set up a rain collection," system, like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting, right? How we can, like, without consciously knowing, right? They're having some kind of connection with Mother Earth, really, and being aware of like not being wasteful. And
Right.
yeah, that's awesome. Now we can shift gear towards learning a little bit more about Volverde, which is amazing. I heard you both at Karina Mora's Latina Brilliance Summit, and I loved your presentation and kind of how Volverde really grew out of just between a conversation, really. And so, yeah, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your business and really why did you decide to start out Volverde?
Yeah, so we've been sustainable shopping, for a long time now. And I think we were really having difficulty getting access to the sustainable products that we wanted. One, there's the closest like sustainable store was like an hour drive for us, which was already hard enough. And then the other thing that we found ourselves is that a lot of times in the sustainability, because Latinos are not talked about, like our hair texture isn't talked about, or the products that we want aren't talked about or marketed to us. We actually found ourselves buying different products from different brands that we loved, and we just felt like, okay, how come there's nothing for us in this space?
Mhm.
And Monica and I don't know, we were having a conversation, and then all of a sudden in text, Monica was like, do you want to start a sustainable e-commerce? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Really.
What do we got to do? I'm in. And I think that just like kind of triggered everything. And that's when we started doing research, and like we already had a lot of brands that we really loved, but then we were like, we got to bring in more brands. And that was, took so much time. But we just really wanted to kind of tackle this problem, especially because we live on the south side of Chicago, where this in access to sustainable products that are specifically, made by women, made by people of color. And we figured that a lot of different people are having the same issue throughout the US. And that's why we decided to do online versus in store. And, we saw that there was a need for this. And that's kind of where it all started.
Well, it was
Awesome.
also just this, like, also full circle moment of, you think about we're 2 Latinas that care about sustainability. There's a ton of there's other sustainable lifestyle stores, but none of them are talking to us. Yet our communities are disproportionately affected by the plastic problem, right? The plastic landfills are more likely to be closer to Latino and or
Mhm.
um Black neighborhoods than they are around white neighborhoods. Asthma and, respiratory conditions as a result of toxic chemicals disproportionately affecting our communities. So, like, it just felt like this kind of, even on a macro level, a real shame that, we are facing the burden, but, we're not really being engaged in the
Mhm.
solution, or at least, in our stories are being co-opted by others, or being left out. So it really felt like there is something here. Um, and, we didn't really see that anywhere else. And we got really excited about, humbly taking on this, challenge of shaping that narrative, to make sustainability about connection and raising awareness about how plastic and these toxic chemicals, impact us differently.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of to like even pinpoint on something Monica just mentioned. I think like talking about the stories and, where do these products come from is so important to us. And you'll see that, on the blogs and social media that we have, because I think that's something that's always happened in sustainability, is that, that whole co-opting of our products. Like, I see so many agave brushes out there, and never once does anyone talk about agave, like where it comes from, or just like there's a lot of things out there and products out there that are coming from Mexico or are coming from, our culture. And no one's actually talking about the hands that made them, about the artisans, where it's coming from. And I think that's so sad because it's such a beautiful story. And I think it's very important to highlight that craft. And that's why we spend a lot of time talking about that, because it's important.
Yeah, and it definitely adds this like level of brand awareness, right? Like knowing where they're coming from, knowing who, the intention behind it, right? And so I'm loving that you are being not just like intentional in your products and ensuring that you partner with women-owned businesses, BIPOC, businesses, but also that you are creating a story and you're narrating that, and making the consumer to be a little bit more aware. Um, because I would
Mhm.
love to know that, right, as a consumer, and I'm very intentional of what I buy or who I support. And so it's great that you're crafting this and making it more humanistic, I would say, than just like, oh, this is just like a brand or a product, right? So yeah, that's awesome. And I know that you have been growing really for the past couple of months, and I have been listening to your story as well in previous episodes from like other podcasts. So y'all are around, which is great. And I think this is much needed. And especially as a business that is an e-commerce, right? Kind of model where it is accessible and open to really anyone who is interested in purchasing products off your website. And so, what are your big goals for this year? I'm kind of excited to hear a little bit more about.
Well, our goal is to, continue growing and doing so organically. Like we're very intentional and thoughtful with how we want to grow. We want to be around in 10 years. We're small, but and we're okay being small as long as we're growing and finding our people. We want to get to that kind of 10-year mark in a way that is sustainable, where we're not like grasping for air and where we really feel like, we built this brick by brick versus just like rushing and um being burnt out. So a lot of it is also just, you know, us reminding ourselves and balancing things as mamas, as hermanas, as business owners, all of those things. Kind of growing while keeping, a semi balance in our lives and and just yeah, connecting organically with customers. We're also launching some new exciting products. We've partnered with some really awesome creatives. And so that's really exciting to, um, put things out there that don't exist in the way don't exist right now. And so that's been a lot of fun and working and collaborating with really brilliant, designers and creatives. We partnered with a Chicago Latina mom who is a textile designer. And this partnership just was very organic. Again, kind of serendipitous, I would say. I've known her for some time and I didn't know she was a textile designer. And she's like, girl, I've been designing textiles for like 10 years. And I was like, what? Um,
Wow.
so, she's got this really beautiful perspective from a design and being a Latina, like she just gets us and she gets what we're trying to do. And so we're bringing on her design expertise and partnering it with the talented artisans that we work with in Oaxaca to produce this new line of sustainably sourced, all handcrafted textiles. Because again, when we look at that space, you go to Target, you see, Crate and Barrel or, West Elm, and you know that those products are made in ways that are hurting the planet. And what we're saying is it's okay to want beautiful things. Like, we like beautiful things. We just want them to last, and we want them to be well made, and we want them to be made in a respectful way. And so we're producing a solution to that, and really with that perspective of Latinos and our experience and our aesthetic.
And I love how our generation is all reclaiming that. Like, even the way that we decorate our homes, right? It's like my goal is to essentially have a kitchen que se ve como el de mi bisabuela, you know?
Yes, like with like the molcajete
Yeah.
and the, all right. No, I
Right. I'll simplify, but, obviously with just like bringing back home. Yeah. Well, I have a final question for both of you as we wrap up. And so, how are you redefining motherhood as mamas?
For me, with my little one, I am trying to kind of be gentle with myself and kind of giving myself the grace of like, I can't do everything. And so I think kind of like really trying to find that balance of being a business owner. I also watch my daughter full time. And so all of that is like so complicated. And so I always have to kind of remind myself that, you know, kind of that the what do they call it? The traditional wife of like the olden times where your mom would like do everything. Like I had to tell myself like I can't be doing that. Like I am a I have to work all day plus watch my daughter all day plus like there's so many different things. And so I told myself like you don't have to live up to all these other standards that everyone might have, or either like I'm putting in my own head. And so I really am trying to kind of like get that noise out of my head and kind of be the best mom that I can be, and also kind of still allowing myself my own time. I think I've seen you talk about it too, being a first time mom for me. I didn't realize how much like of myself I would lose. And like I think that's been kind of my hardest part is like trying to reconnect with myself. And like I always like I always tell Monica that it feels like I'm back in my college years, kind of
Mm.
refinding myself. And that's been an interesting journey for me. I didn't think I would have to like
Mhm.
that again. And so kind of like giving myself the grace to kind of refine who I am now with like my old self plus my new self and just be a better person.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's all a transition. It's all and that's life, and it's all about that identity formation, and I learned that in graduate school, right? Like how we go through certain stages, and you know what? It is okay to grieve. And I always say that like it's okay to grieve your old past life, and I'm sure you're getting this from the wisdom of Monica and your sisters and everything. And that's something that I had to learn, like it's okay to miss that part of our old life, and how can we kind of add that aspect into this current season that we're in. And it's all a season, right? Because the next step would be raising a teenager, and that in itself, I hear it's scary. Monica, you're not there yet, right? But you're close.
No, I know. I definitely have a preteen on my hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, again, yeah, I hear Aidee and I'm like, "Oh, I remember feeling that," and I still feel that, but it's evolved as my kids have, gotten older, and like, what they need of me now is different, and how I'm balancing motherhood with my other parts is different. And for me right now, the main thing is learning how to, and in so many ways, we're giving things we never received. And that's what's so hard about our generation of motherhood, at least for me, and I think our sisters, right? Like, we are, our mom was a very different mom than how we are with our children. And it just can sometimes be very taxing to, give what you don't have and like heal yourself while being there for your children. Um, while still dealing with aging parents that, so you're kind of getting sandwiched on all sides. But for me, it's really being, I think, a present and empathetic parent. I think very different from our parents who were very hierarchical and would be what I say goes. I dictate, I make decisions and you follow rules. Um, and with my kids, like it doesn't, they're trying to find themselves and learning how to be you're almost like walking next to them, and sometimes you're guiding them, you're walking ahead of them, but it's important to learn that balance of knowing when your kids need you to lead and when they need you to step back and
Yeah.
let them lead. And
Yeah.
that's difficult because I don't, sometimes when your kids are younger, like, you're always leading or you're always kinda showing them, and now I'm finding myself very quickly being like, "Wait, I just need to listen," and, or I need to ask the right questions to get, to get them to talk to me because they've had a long day and they're like, "Fine, fine, fine," you know? Um, so it just learning how to be kind of adaptable and meeting them where they are while also being, you know, guiding them.
Yeah.
It's a difficult dance, and I'm trying to get there in a way that's led with empathy and kindness and respect, not by fear,
Right.
not by, aggression, and, but that's hard. It's hard to unlearn what, you know,
Yeah.
there's still that part of me that wants to be like, "Pinches chiquillos."
Si no vas a hacer
And I'll
esto, vas a,
yeah,
yeah, the
right
threatening, the threatening.
there. I wanna be like, I want us to me, like, the success of, like, from a parenting perspective, like, I want when they're older, like, I want them to want to hang out with us and to respect and, like, enjoy my company versus, like, oh, mom." Um, so, but a lot of that right now, like, just discerning what they need from you when they need it from you, is tough.
Yeah. I'm just loving like how the freedom of us, especially as mamas and as like individuals who want to make change for our future generations, our children, right? It's like we can pick up from our ancestors, like the beautiful side of our culture, right? And kind of bringing it a full circle. We are the ones responsible and holding that kind of standard, if you will, to teach our kids to live a
Mhm.
sustainable life and reclaim that back into our lifestyle, to honor, our ancestors, our abuelitas. And so I'm loving everything, and this conversation really, yeah,
Same.
I really appreciate you both being here. And so where can people follow you, for those of my listeners that haven't heard about you?
Yeah, you can follow us. We're mostly active on Instagram at underscore volverde underscore. Sign up to our newsletter. We always release our new collections there first, and we have amazing storytelling there as well. You always get first access to what we do on our sourcing trips, which is also always amazing. So definitely there. And you can also visit us at www.volverde.com to take a look around and see all of the Susty goods we have as well.
Yes, awesome. Yes, I'll make sure to share that on the show notes. And by any chance, like, what are your top 3 sold items?
It's all the agave stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And specifically, the number one is the agave body sponge. I wish I had
Mhm.
it right now,
I
but
haven't.
or do you have? Yeah, so it's like a round sponge, and I think what everyone really loves about it is because it also has like a handle, so
Mhm.
it's just like
Yeah.
very easy to kind of like scrub yourself. And then now we have a larger size too. So I think some people wanted something that would cover a little bit more surface area, but that's probably our number one seller right now.
That's awesome.
Yes, colguetas are also really popular. Again, very like nostalgic pieces. But they're also super functional. Like
Mhm.
people buy them, they think that they're cute, and then they come back and buy them again because they work really well for like cast
Mhm.
iron, your comal. They're they're much more durable than the scotch pads or whatever, like the conventional plastic stuff.
Mhm.
I love those too because they're like agave was used to make ropes and like really dirt like for centuries, right? It was used at because it's a very strong material, and so now we're repurposing it for these brushes. And then I think the other one would maybe be the bag,
Yeah. Or the sanara oil.
soap or the oil. Yeah, the body oil.
Mhm.
Oh, nice. Yes. Well, thank you both so much. I'll make sure to share all of your information and just, to have this conversation about kind of reclaiming the traditions that we saw with our abuelitas. And I know that this is going to be very nostalgic for my listeners, but I think it's time, for us to bring that back, and we have that freedom to do that and having that intentionality, right? And that way our children can not only live a sustainable life, but also be aware of their environment and their planet. So yeah, thank you both so much. I really appreciate it.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Mujer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a rating and review? Hitting that follow button and reviewing my show will allow other mommies like you find this podcast. Your review will also tell me if you enjoy the show, so I would truly appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget, please share this podcast con tus amigas. Also, make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. Okay, mujer, thank you for joining y nos vemos in the next episode.